Democrats have retained control of the Maine Senate and have elected new leadership. Neither Troy Jackson nor Eloise Vitelli, the Senate President and the Senate Majority Leader from the last legislature, were able to run again due to term limits. Yesterday, Maine Senate Democrats elected Maddie Daughtry of Brunswick to be their new Senate President. She was the Assistant Majority Leader in the last legislature. Senator Teresa Pierce of Falmouth and Senator Jill Dewson of Portland were chosen to serve as Senate Majority Leader and Assistant Majority Leader. As of this morning, it was not clear when Senate Republicans would elect their leadership. As for the Maine House, where it appears Democrats have also retained control, Republicans are expected to elect their leadership this morning, with House Democrats electing their leaders next Wednesday.